Let me break something to you. Most people believe conversation is about exchanging ideas, being clear, being polite, being understood. But real power doesn't care about being understood. It cares about being obeyed without resistance. You think words are for connection. The powerful no words are for redirection, because the one who controls the flow controls the frame, and the one who controls the frame controls the outcome. Now here's the truth that should rattle you. You don't win conversations by being clever. You win them by never letting others define the terms. Let that sink in. You've been trained to reply, to answer, to clarify, to say what I meant was. Every time you do that, you step into a frame someone else built. You think you're defending your point, but you're just dancing inside their boundaries. That's not communication. That's capture. Now look back. How many times have you walked away from a conversation knowing you didn't say anything wrong, but still feeling like you lost something? That's because you never owned the substructure. You didn't speak from architecture. You spoke from habit. And in power dynamics, habits get read like scripts. Here's what they never told you. Precision language isn't about saying more. It's about saying less strategically. One pause, one eyebrow, one deflection. And suddenly, they're explaining themselves, backpedaling, trying to find the ground you just pulled out from under them. This video isn't about sounding smarter. It's not about persuasion. It's not about being good at talking. It's about directional control, linguistic pressure points, stealth frame injections, conversational judo. You won't raise your voice. You'll just bend reality by shifting one word. And when you do it right, they'll believe it was their idea all along. That's the art. So, if you've ever felt like you keep giving away power even when you're being nice, even when you're being honest, it's not your fault. You were taught to speak, but not to steer. Let's change that. Let's begin. Let's dismantle an illusion. You were taught that words are just tools for expressing yourself, for exchanging information, for getting your point across. That's the kindergarten version of reality. In power dynamics, words are not tools. They are levers, traps, permission slips for behavior. Words don't just describe reality. They shape it. They frame it. They tell the listener what role to play and what emotional tone to adopt. This is why one sentence can collapse a room and another can ignite war. Let's get precise. You think you're just being honest when you say you're always late, but you just positioned yourself as the accuser. You invited defense. You set the stage for excuses and arguments. Now say instead, how long should we pretend this is acceptable? Notice the shift. That's not accusation. That's framing. It forces introspection. It triggers self-judgment without confrontation. Same situation. Different words. Radically different psychological effect. That's the framing effect. The idea that people's responses are shaped more by how something is phrased than by what is actually said. It's why great manipulators never argue. They just ask the right question and watch you dig your own mental hole. Because whoever controls the question controls the frame, and whoever controls the frame owns the outcome. Here's the trap no one sees coming. Every time you answer a loaded question, you're not just responding, you're submitting. Think about it. Why are you so emotional? Don't you trust me? Why didn't you just say something? These aren't questions. They're invisible cages. If you answer them as is, you've already agreed to the terms. Even if you fight back, you're still inside their logic. That's unconscious submission. And most people live their entire lives inside other people's logic, other people's framing, other people's emotional script. But what happens when you stop replying to the question and start reframing the moment you don't answer? You redirect. You say, the real issue isn't my reaction, it's your expectation. We're not going to have this conversation on your terms. Pause. Let's define the real question here. Suddenly, the floor shifts. They lose balance. You regain gravity. Because in a world obsessed with words, the ones who win are those who know. Words aren't reflections. They're weapons. Sharpen them. Use them precisely. Because the first rule of control is not volume, but structure. And the moment you understand that every conversation becomes a battlefield, and every sentence a strategy, most people don't think, they react automatically. And that's exactly where the trap begins. Not in shouting matches, but in simply silent phrases. Phrases that sneak past logic and hijack your response system. Let's start with presuppositions. These are statements that hide assumptions inside them. You don't notice the trap, but your mind still plays along. Take this one. When you start taking yourself seriously, it sounds encouraging, but it's not. It assumes you don't take yourself seriously yet. It places you below the speaker, and now you're subconsciously trying to prove them wrong. Another one, once you stop running from your potential, implies you're scared, implies you've been hiding, implies you've failed. Even if none of that is true, the moment you answer, you've accepted the frame. Now watch how this escalates. Next, tactic false binaries. These questions look innocent, but they leave no clean way out. Example: are you avoiding this because you're afraid or just unsure? Both options make you look weak. And the question assumes you are avoiding it. There's no room to challenge that. You're forced to defend a position you never chose. And most people fall for it, because the brain prefers answering over analyzing. Now we get to soft domination, the quiet power move. It sounds neutral, but it frames the speaker as authority. Example: I noticed you always interrupt people. I noticed you're always late. That feels observational, but it's a judgment disguised as concern. The speaker becomes the observer, the analyst. You're the subject. Under their lens, no conflict. But now you feel guilty, and they never had to raise their voice. One more. The ultimate subtle trap. Help me understand why this keeps happening. It sounds patient, even compassionate, but it's not. It assumes there's a problem, assumes you caused it, assumes it's happening again. You're not being asked. You're being cornered. Now you must explain your failure without ever being allowed to question the frame. This is high-level language control, because the person asking the question owns the stage, owns the tone, owns your reaction. But here's the key. You can flip the script. Say this instead. That's not a question I accept. I don't respond to embedded accusations. I don't explain my boundaries. Every phrase is either a frame or a test of yours. Choose wisely, because the most dangerous traps are the ones that sound polite. Power isn't volume. It isn't fast talking. It isn't being the first to respond. Power is presence. It's the ability to say less, but shift everything. Let me show you what that looks like. Tactic 1. Strategic ambiguity. Most people feel compelled to fill every silence, to explain, to justify, to wrap every sentence in context so they don't get misunderstood. But here's the trick. Silence creates pressure, and pressure creates control. Instead of reacting, pause. Instead of explaining, simplify. Instead of defending, let the discomfort grow. Example. Someone says, "That didn't go well." Did it? Most will scramble to explain. Smooth it over. You just say, "Interesting." Then stay silent. Now they scramble. Now they over-explain. Because humans can't stand unconfirmed signals, and in that gap, you take control. Tactic 2. Reframed curiosity. When someone challenges you, don't react with force. React with calm analysis. Their energy is loud. Yours is surgical. Instead of saying you're wrong, say, "That's interesting. Where does that certainty come from?" Now, the pressure shifts. Now, they must validate their frame. Now, you're not the one justifying anything they are. See the difference? It's not confrontation. It's inversion. You flip the power without raising your voice. Tactic 3. Verbal mirror. Let's talk about one of the most lethal tactics, neutral repetition. When someone tries to trap you with phrasing, don't deny it. Don't explain. Just mirror. Example them. You always overreact. You overreact. Say it slowly, softly. No emotion, just observation. It doesn't feel like an attack, but it's a mirror. Now they're looking at themselves. Now they're on the defensive. Because you didn't fight. You just reflected. Real life example. Let's say you're at work. Your manager says, "Help me understand why this keeps happening." It sounds calm, reasonable, but it's a trap because it implies guilt. You're not explaining an event, you're justifying your existence. Now flip it. You say, "What makes you think it keeps happening?" You've just shifted the burden. Now they have to prove their own claim. Without realizing, you just flip the frame. Subtext. This isn't about being clever. It's about psychological terrain. You don't control the conversation by dominating it. You control it by owning the architecture underneath. You ask the questions. You set the frame. You decide what gets defined and what stays ambiguous. And in ambiguity, you build power. You've heard the phrase, "Words are weapons." But what no one tells you is most people are unarmed. They walk into conversations already framed, already disarmed, already playing a game they didn't choose. The trap isn't obvious. It sounds polite. It feels familiar. But the moment you feel rushed, the moment you feel guilt without clarity, The moment you feel like silence equals submission, you're in a psychological loop. Step 1. Recognize the loop. You can't defend what you don't detect. Ask yourself, do I feel pressured to reply quickly? Am I being forced into a yes/no binary? Do I feel guilty, but can't name a reason? If yes, you're not thinking, you're reacting, and reaction is control handed to someone else. Step 2. Break the pattern. Language traps are like hypnosis. They work best when unchallenged. So, challenge. Not with emotion, but with precision. When someone says, "So are you saying you don't care?" Pause. Then ask, why is that the only option? You've just short-circuited the binary. Or when they say, "I guess this just isn't a priority for you," reply, who told you that was the right assumption? Now they have to defend. You control the tempo. Step 3. Refuse the frame. Some questions don't deserve an answer. They deserve exposure. If someone asks, "Why do you always mess this up?" don't defend. Don't explain. Say, "I don't engage with loaded questions." And stop. Let the silence do the cutting. You've just refused the entire frame. And that refusal is power. Step 4. Reclaim the narrative. Most people defend within someone else's rules. You don't. They say, "Well, that's just how it is." You say, "That's one way to see it. Here's mine." Because you're not here to win their game. You're here to end it. And start your own. Subtext. If you don't control the conversation, you are the conversation. You become a reaction, a reflection, a character in their script. But the moment you break the trance, the moment you ask, who benefits from this frame, the spell ends. And in that moment, you stop echoing, you start commanding. You ever notice how some people walk into a room and suddenly the air gets heavier? They don't speak first. They don't interrupt. But when they do speak, the room orbits them. That's not charisma. That's gravitational language, redefining power in speech. This isn't about speaking better. It's about engineering perception. Because when every word carries tension, you don't need repetition. You don't need volume. You need precision. Most people use words like cheap glass, easy to shatter, easy to ignore. But you're done with fragile language. From now on, your speech must bend attention. Slow it, sink it, center it. Conversational gravity equals emotional calibration. Here's the formula. Say only what can't be argued. Leave silence after truth. Let discomfort do the rest. Examples. I'm not here to explain myself. I'm here to witness your reaction. Not defensive. Pure calibration. Say that again. Slower. You're not confused. You're studying. Interesting choice of words. Why that phrasing, "they trip" on their own syntax? You didn't touch them. You're not a mirror. You're a black hole. Mirrors reflect. You absorb. And in that absorption, you distort their narrative. You pull hidden intent to the surface without raising your voice. Without touching their ego. That's conversational gravity. They circle you, trying to adjust, trying to stabilize. They don't realize you already own the field. Final message before next part. Stop aiming to be understood. Start making others afraid to misunderstand you. That's not arrogance. That's sovereignty. And the moment they feel your presence in a sentence, they'll start questioning every one of theirs. Let me ask you one final thing. Who taught you to speak just to be liked, to word your sentences like soft landings rather than strategic invasions? At what point did your language shift? From a tool of directional force to a leash wrapped in politeness, you weren't born saying, "Does that make sense?" You learned it. From classrooms, from corporate scripts, from people who feared sounding firm. But that's not power. That's performance. And power does not perform. It calibrates. It frames. It moves. Your command one phrase. One shift. Today. Erase one weak phrase from your vocabulary. Just one. Maybe it's "I could be wrong." But sorry if that sounds harsh. That's just my opinion. Now, replace it. Not with noise, but with stillness. With a line that doesn't ask for space, it claims it. Example, from sorry. Just my opinion. To, it's my perspective. Take it or leave it. No explanation. No softener. No emocional tiptoe. Final frame megaphones shout. But masters don't shout. They reflect. They redirect. They reshape the room. Because true power in conversation isn't how loud you speak. It's what your silence makes them question. Speak like a mirror, and soon they'll see their own frame collapse. In your reflection. End transmission.